We're on the hours. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Frank DiCarlo, and welcome to New Jersey DAM's live panel discussion, DAM Success, Remote Working Part 2. Today, this is the second of the two-part Remote Working Digital Asset Management webinar series we created. Part 1 was recorded a few weeks back and can be found on New Jersey DAM's YouTube channel, which concentrates on the DAM professionals who have already been practicing working remotely in their DAM careers. And today, we'll be focusing on the employers and the managers who have and continue to supervise remote teams and their success with the DAM professionals they manage. In short, digital asset management is comprehensive software that safely stores, organizes, and shares digital media files like photos and videos. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted the way millions of us work and thrusted many of us to embrace having our teams work outside the traditional office space. This cause and effect, confusion, and disarray of the changes in how we conduct our everyday is undeniable. How we are adapting and are working will, of course, someday dissipate and we will return to some sort of normalcy. But I think you'll agree, evident in your tuning in today, that aspects of remote work revolution is here to stay. And how can we adjust and acclimate? Our webinar addresses that even before the pandemic, how many incorporated working from anywhere as a common practice in their experience as a digital asset manager and employer. It's a very relevant topic and a terrific panel we have today. Hello, panel.
Hey, Frank.
Hello.
Hey.
Great to have you here. Let's take a moment and allow our experts to introduce themselves. Just a little bit about yourself, your name, and how you began to work remotely and with your DAM teams. So Kevin, you mind starting us off?
Sure. I was going to let ladies go first, but if you say so, I'll go first. My name's Kevin Martirano. I've been in the industry providing DAM solutions and delivering DAM solutions for about 30 plus years. I am the Chief Information Officer and Senior System Engineer at PCL Solutions based in Nutley, New Jersey, and familiar with a good portion of the digital asset management solutions that are out there, both from the off-the-shelf box products and some of the high-end customized solutions that are out there.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's get with start with the ladies second. Let's move to Beverly.
Hi there, I'm Beverley Thomas, and I work with Baldwin and Obanoff, which is a full-service marketing agency out of Somerville, New Jersey. And prior to that, I had my own agency where it was a virtual office, so we worked remotely for 15 years. So I've been in the industry and working with DAM on both the client and the supplier side since the very early 90s when it was bleeding edge. But it's really definitely something that's going to make for good conversation today.
Thanks, Bev. Peter.
Hi, my name's Peter Parker. I've been working in the DAM industry for quite a few number of years now, in a number of roles, from bringing in a first DAM solution to New York magazines, to working for DAM software vendors, and supporting companies around the globe. I'm currently with Sartorius, with its headquarters in Germany. We also have a number of facilities around the United States and other countries, and look forward to sharing some of my experiences with everyone today.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. And last but not least, Cheryl.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Taylor. I'm formerly a digital asset manager for Brick Arts in Brooklyn. I'm presently a DAM librarian for Wells Fargo. Prior to Brick, I was part of a DAM implementation for the United Nations. So I've been in digital asset management for about 5 years now. Just recently became a remote worker, just prior to the pandemic. And it's been an interesting experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Cheryl. All right, panelists, let's get to it. We'll ask our first question. And like I said to the audience, please get your questions ready and submit them when you can to the question and answer icon. What are some of the advantages to work with your DAM teams remotely? And is your team more productive by working outside the office? In no particular order.
I think I can take that. Part of working for, I work for a totally remote team, and we work from all over the country. And because it's such a large organization, we're able to work into different time zones, tackling different problems, and we can coordinate better working remotely, scheduling regular meetings, and it allows you to be able to deal with some people one-on-one, and or you can actually work with large groups. So I think the advantage for Wells Fargo is that, you know, you have people working from all over the world, and you can coordinate those teams much better when you have people working remotely.
Yeah, I can probably echo some of the same sentiments. Our organization is an international one, so it's much easier to manage communications between time zones and countries when you're working remotely, meaning you have much more flexibility to take an evening conference call to connect Europe with the West Coast or vice versa. So there's a lot more flexibility in the scheduling rather than always having to match up traditional business hours. And of course, the idea that pretty much all DAM software now is web-based or web UI-based. You're really, when you're within the actual application, just interacting with software. So, you know, as long as you have the right digital device in front of you, you can find an environment with less distractions and then only schedule your interactions with your coworkers as needed.
I think for us, we're finding that the everybody working remotely really requires a little extra discipline in how you schedule your day, where you might do things a little more casually, or, you know, you schedule a meeting for an hour, but it really goes into an hour and 15 minutes because of whatever sidebar conversations you have. And now that everybody is scheduled back to back on meetings, you really, you know, hit your agenda, you plan your agenda, and you make sure you cross everything off before your time's up, because people have to come off and go on to the next topic. I also think from a DAM perspective, it makes people think more about working in a team environment as far as how they're sharing files, right? It's very easy for everybody when you're in the office to get sloppy and keep things on your local desktop that you're not backing up anywhere. And that can lead to all kinds of trouble, obviously. So I think it becomes heightened that you have the discipline to make sure you keep things backed up, that they're not just on your local desktop.
I would say also, you know, the pandemic came on us fairly quick, and some companies that had a robust DAM and had their solutions in place were able to leverage their DAM during the pandemic. And there were a lot of customers that relied heavily on VPN access to their solutions, and that just didn't deliver with the number of users they never expected to be able to deliver the data. And they found out clearly they couldn't. So those that had a DAM system were able to go ahead and get access to their assets. And again, in the old days, it was just images and maybe some, you know, type of, layouts from some page publishing that's a publishing application. But nowadays, what is a digital asset management? It's sound, it's audio, it's Excel's, Word files, PowerPoints. It's just about everything we work with. And so those give us that overlap to be able to bring a whole business, not just the graphics department or the marketing department, but if leveraged right, a DAM can deliver solutions across the entire business spectrum.
Very true. And the roles of the DAM managers, and certainly yourselves that are managing those teams, has changed dramatically, as you're pointing out, from years ago. Now we're a little more concerned with how images and files are moving through the enterprise, and with remote working, what I see is the idea of having the ability to manage a number of different people rather than just one manager, right? So you don't have one person doing the metadata, taxonomy, and the user adoption, you know, holding the meetings and the governance. You know, you can now point those to different directions and have an entire team that's working together in unison and being able to look at the entire process from 30,000 feet. Excellent. opportunity to hire people that excel in those different areas. So how is your company benefiting by employing remote teams for your DAM programs?
I think for us, it's about being able to manage a couple of different tasks all at once. And for us, we're in the process of upgrading and implementation. So having everybody working remote, being that you don't have it during this pandemic, there was no choice, but work went on as normal because we have a robust DAM and you have people in place to handle different parts of the implementation. Business can go on as usual. When you're siloed, it's a little difficult to do that. So I think the whole idea of a good DAM management program where people can still connect and keep things going in the present state makes things a lot easier.
I would agree too, and I think how people have implemented DAM. Some people have implemented it strictly as a library type of tool where they store assets that are maybe going to be picked up again or used again, and the other people that are doing their production off of the digital asset management. So I think depending on which side of the fence you are on, you can gain some significant benefits by using it in a work in place type of scenario if your DAM supports that. So I think a lot of organizations have been able to not skip a beat. With some of the customers that I have that are magazine publishers, newspaper publishers, ad agencies, they haven't missed a deadline because they had the tools, they were able to leverage it properly and not just use it for a library function to store assets and legacy assets, but also do full-blown production as easy if they were in the office. Obviously bandwidth permitting, right? But other than that, that worked out quite well.
For us, we were able to switch over to a fully remote work environment within a matter of a day. And we had some people that continued to go into the office maybe once a week to take care of some things until we got them to be able to work offline. And that was mostly around the large format production type of work that we were doing in our agency. So that doesn't translate quite as easily to remote working. But we really were able to take an operation of 50 people on site and pare it down to 3 people on site in a matter of 4 hours. So what that does is it gives us freedom as the management of the company to make wise decisions about returning to work and what are the risks that you are willing or are not willing to take to return to work, right? So that's a big decision for business owners of what it really means to get people to return to work in this state of we don't really know where we are with the pandemic, right? And also, once you return to work, if the flu season or something spikes up again, being able to quickly toggle between on-site, off-site. And it's not 2 different workflows, it's one workflow that works equally well in both environments. So I think that's really given us a lot of control as the management team in a situation where, you really lose a lot of control. So it's been very helpful. We really have not missed a deadline. It has not affected our clients in any negative way. And we're really looking to them to help us to determine when we need to go back to the office for that very reason. If there's no indication from them, then we're not in a rush, right? We don't have to, if they're feeling like they're getting everything from us that they get when we're all in the office, then we're not in a rush and we don't have to put our employees in a situation that they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, I would say sort of a nice parallel to that is that, our company is biopharmaceutical and laboratory equipment based, and a number of the divisions within our company is actually production oriented. So there's physical activity that's required. So being able to take your e-business and DAM teams off-site and remote working from home or other locations really frees up the available resources to dedicate to those employees that need to be on site. So we had certainly some PPE, available for our clean rooms and things like that, as well as masks for essential personnel on site. But we were able to make sure that all of those resources were dedicated to those that needed by keeping, the teams that could work remotely at home. And of course, that works very well in an international environment where you have, plenty of people spread out all over the world. So much of that work, was already remote. At times we would fly people into the headquarters for big meetings or things like that, or for knowledge sharing sessions and things like that. But we're finding, perfectly acceptable alternatives to that maintain that remote working functionality and function within the restrictions that we face today.
Good. What tools, workflows are you using, and how do they address remote work with your DAM process?
Well, maybe I'll start with this one since it's one of my favorite topics. That DAM is certainly just one piece of the entire operation for the actual archiving, storing, and tagging of the assets, but just as much of it is going to be how those things are routed and used, and how you manage all of the tasks around that. So just as much as managing the content within your DAM goes on in our organization, so does the development of new functionality. So we have, an entire development team in-house, and we also are continually working on greater levels of integration with our website, eShop, ERP, CRM systems, and things like that. So we use a lot of the Atlassian tools. So we're in there continually creating like user stories and really distributing the responsibilities for a lot of these tasks, but in a very transparent fashion. So, I know agile workflow is sort of like the big buzzword these days, but it is very applicable to times like these where you really have a much greater level into transparency of what people are doing, what tasks are still on the board that need to be pushed through different stages. And so we've really found a lot of these off-the-shelf, project management tools that integrate both development and actual tasks within our systems has been extremely important to succeeding these days.
I could go real quick. I don't want to step in front of anybody, but I would say that from a workflow standpoint, things that we normally couldn't get adopted in the office, like going back to OPI from back in the old days, where people were dropping a high resolution image on the server and using for placement only images to have the server swap them out, or the asset management system swap those assets out. People stopped doing that because networks got faster. But now we're in a scenario where they don't have the best networking, and they also are sharing the high resolution connection, the high speed connection with all the other users. So we've seen a lot of sites go back to utilizing OPI, placing low-res proxy images to build their jobs and their work, and then simply sending the files back to the server to get them swapped out before they go to print or exported to PDF. So I think some of the tools have helped greatly reduce the amount of network traffic and allow them to keep production going out the door. Photographers out in the field are taking their pictures, doing what they need to do. They're uploading them to the asset management system, and then the next people get the files and they get a notification that those files have been uploaded. And then somebody goes out and starts meta tagging them, and another person makes a call via pull down menus or metadata tags to move the data around the server. And some files get designated as to just move these straight to archive. We want to keep them, but we're not going to use them. And other ones get sent to the retouching department to get retouched. So I think leveraging and building a really good digital asset management that's based on metadata and triggers and actions with the environments that support it can really help build a proper workflow, whether you're in the office or remote. And I think a lot of those things that they're doing now that they wouldn't do before, I think when they finally go back to the office, I think they're going to continue that. I think they're going to continue a lot of those good practices that they've learned at the situation that we're currently in.
For us, we find that we, as an agency that supports many large corporations, we tend to adopt into our workflow what is their workflow, right? So if they have an asset management tool, or they have a platform that they're most comfortable with for project management or something like that, a lot of times we are a user on their system. But ironically, we're a user on their system, but we're also helping them to understand the process and how to best manage through that system, because the people that are the users with us may not be familiar with how the tools work and what they can do with them. So our biggest issue in everybody going remote all at once is that we're looking for a way to consolidate, are we going to use Zoom or Skype or Teams or WebEx? Are we going to use Slack or chat, or which tools are we using? What are we using? Basecamp? What are the different tools? Because we, as an agency, we're creating smaller project teams, and the project teams were using what their clients were using. So we're really in a consolidation mode and trying to determine for our agency what are our preferred platforms that we're going to use in the event that it's not dictated by the client. In some cases, because some of our clients are very large pharma or medical device companies, we are using their document control systems, right? We do check in and check out through their approval process, and that's a compliance issue, so you really have to stay within what they have. But in some cases, we can kind of be more prescriptive in what platforms we would use.
Right.
I'm working with just one group where I'm working under a marketing team, and there's over like 300,000 employees. So each portion of that group has a different workflow, has a different process, and it's up to the individual librarians to help assist and help them carve out and develop their own workflow. So I adapt to their workflows and just help them figure out ways to better implement that workflow.
I think to Peter's point, I think that a lot of people that are using the system, a lot of the people that are engaging with the system are probably looking at engaging with the system to deliver at a higher level and deliver digital asset management to people that necessarily weren't working with the digital asset management at the level that they could have been working with all along. And so this has been a real learning process for everyone, I think, that's involved.
Great. Any other workflows that you wanted to touch upon? I know with some of our retail clients, we've been practicing this idea of having remote retouchers, people doing metadata based on what a photographer might be capturing, and different photographers. And when you have different photographers capturing the same product, everything needs to be color corrected. You need the coordination with meta tagging and taxonomy, and with the digital asset management system, what we've been providing different teams and different clients, we find it advantageous so that everything is uploaded to one central repository, and artists can go in there and grab an entire collection and grab a hero, so to speak, that represents the true color. So you're getting color consistency, able to go to the other images that may need a little more of a tweaking or a massaging to get that color to where it needs to be, because you don't want different colors showing up on your website when you have your customers shopping and not really sure what it is that they're purchasing.
Oh, yeah.
Other workflows you can share that you find with remote teams and how digital asset management aids in that?
Well, one of the things I think helping teams figure out how to leverage those assets. A lot of people, and my old digital asset management system just became a portal for just dumping everything. But once it was sorted out and people were forced to work remotely, you can start looking at what's there and figure out, it was a production facility, so we can't get in to do the work we want to do. So let's look at what we have in our portal and figure out how can we leverage this into something else. And I've noticed on a lot of even the major television networks, they are creating new shows from old material. And digital asset management is a big part of that. If you have a good digital asset management system and it's capital efficiency, you can go in and start collaborating and coordinating redoing old stuff and repurposing to create new stuff until you can get back into the flow of good production. And I've seen that over and over again. So I think, that's a good utilization workflow for digital asset management, is going in and coordinating and curating new things from old stuff.
Yeah, I know one thing sort of on a more technical side of all of that, but still going back to the whole workflow concept, is that we've always had a big push to do what we call decouple things. So the idea that because so many systems are interconnected, it's become much more obvious that you want to ensure that each one can survive the unavailability of another. So we have built in a lot of sort of fail-safe practices so that nightly exports occur to our web CMS, and that we're employing a much greater use of CDN networks to get things to people, or that when we're sharing content with partners and vendors, that we certainly allow interaction directly with the system in some cases, but we will also provide the ability to sort of deliver content to a specified location that can allow access to that selected content regardless of the status of the system where you organize it and deliver it from. So we're seeing like I said, we've always had a big focus on that, but we're really seeing it paying dividend in these times where there is so much more traffic across, all networks that a lot of these practices are really paying off, and where we were looking to improve it in areas, we're now getting the backing of our stakeholders to continue to push forward with that.
I think too, you mentioned user stories and using some products like Trello, I think. I don't know if you mentioned it, just I made the connection there. But using products like that to get good user stories. So when you have a digital asset management system and you come in it from a perspective of this is how you use it, it doesn't mean that all the other groups within your organization are going to want to work that same way. So having good user stories, sitting down with each team and department, finding out what they do and how they do it, and trying to replicate it and create best practices and show them the new tools and the new buttons and features that'll help enhance what they're doing, gets greater adoption, as well as finds out all sorts of new workflows to save them time and money for all around. So I think really good user stories to develop good workflows is the key. Once you get the digital asset management system up, running, and some content in it, then you can go ahead and start. I don't want to do it all up front, but I want to get it in. I want to get people playing with it first, and then I want to go ahead and go group by group, department by department. And the crazy thing is that you'll find out that departments that never thought that they would ever get on board, that you may never have thought of got on board with it, suddenly, hey, this is something we need to adopt. This is something that we need to go ahead and look at and get on board with. And some of the number one questions that I get since the whole pandemic started is how can we leverage this internally? And that's the answer, is going ahead and having good workflow analysis and build some user stories so you can then deliver and think about how to use a tool in new ways.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Kevin. So we had an experience with one of our clients that was as part of the compliance workflow that I was talking about, production work. And, for 3 years, we were trying to get them to move to a digital proofing system, right? And sharing the digital proofs from printers. And last year we had a huge project that had, literally half the timeline that was required. So for that project alone, we did a pilot and did digital proofing. And at the end of that project in December, we started a pilot program to roll out, well, what would it mean if we did digital proofing for the other projects, for the other production work? And we started that in December, and then this happened in March. Well, of course, that took everything that was kind of happening at a very slow, methodical pace and turned it as to the top priority overnight. and then we wanted to change it so that the whole workflow was based on digital proofing. So I think it's tools that are in the background and you leverage them and you show a positive use case and an example of how you can do it as long as you're careful in the process. And once you have a success, then you can start to roll it out. You don't necessarily have to wait for a pandemic to make the need that much greater. But luckily, we had that case study there to say, we can do this, but you have to follow certain quality steps to make sure you're not taking shortcuts.
Agree.
Kevin, you mentioned metadata. Anything you can add
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the earlier digital asset management programs simply did graphical data and that type of content. Now, when they added metadata and XMP files and such, XMP metadata tags to the files and simply database tags, a lot of the companies implemented the ability to change a metadata field and something happens. The file moves, the file gets renamed, the file sends an email and gets an approval on that. So you can soft proof directly within the applications these days. So, metadata-driven workflows, especially when you're working remote, because they move files around. Who wants to download a bunch of files, then move them to another folder? It's much easier to have metadata tags and say, hey, I want the retouches to go to this. And so I assign these files to retouching. And everybody in the retouching department gets an email, and they can choose to grab that job basket, depending on how you're delivering it, and then start working on that particular project. So metadata makes it easier to find assets, and it also makes it easy to create automation, deliver to printers or deliver to the video department. We've surprisingly, when the video modules started being added to the digital asset management systems, a lot of groups within the ad agencies and Marcoms were saying, well, video is the missing piece of the digital asset management. And there's even digital asset management tools out there that allow you to do rough cut edits right from a web browser. So I think all in all, I think based on the metadata tags, amazing things are possible that you would never think before. And most of all, I think when you've got a digital asset management system, there's kind of two types, right? There's the box-based digital asset management system. You take it, you install it, and it does what it does. And then there's the other ones that are essentially like construction sets. So you have to keep buying and developing to get exactly what you want. The nice thing about a metadata-driven system is that without any programmatic capabilities or programming or development team internally, you can develop these really amazing workflows very, very easily and move assets around, deliver assets to clients, get approvals, archive the data once everything is done, still shows up in the system. So, I think we're in a much more mature DAM space than we were 10 years ago. I think everything is very much evolved, and I'm excited about where it's going to go.
That's a great point. You forget sometimes what triggers and actions can do in moving a process along, right? So once thing's done, you move it into a folder, for an example, that might hit a team. They get emails or updates or alerts that their step in the process is up, and away the asset goes. And
I would also say that a lot of these digital asset management systems, as opposed to early on, most of them were proprietary. Now, most of them are built on open platform systems and open standards. So that means that you can use products from Atlassian and Workfront and other products, and you can integrate those tools together to make data flow through different systems seamlessly. And that's really when you can get creative and do some really cool things, whether it's a soft proofing system, whether you've got a dedicated video editing solution that needs to be able to connect to, whether you're doing user stories and you need to link your Atlassian products or your Workfront products or just about anything else to it. It's a huge advantage. It's come far along the way from where we first started this, for sure.
Excellent. Let's talk about a couple obstacles. What obstacles have you and your DAM teams faced in moving to a remote environment, and how'd you overcome it?
Broadband.
That's the favorite.
You're saying that everybody doesn't have a gigabit connection at home like I do?
What? Yeah, broadband's a big one.
Yeah, that's good. No doubt about it.
User differences. People who aren't really user ready. it takes some time to get them acclimated into a system if they've never been in it before, working remotely. But I also believe that one-on-ones are advantageous, and you can use screen shares and you can literally guide people through. So that's one aspect.
Absolutely.
And just the the architecture of your own organization was a big challenge for many people. Certainly, some dam systems, have fairly public access that really just rely on your login credentials. But there are quite a few that are very dependent on VPN connections, and the scaling up of the remote users when all of this hit the world really pressed a lot of IT departments to scale all of those solutions and support that. So I know certainly within our own organization, we had some incredible IT people that made things happen, overnight. But you went from certainly having maybe 5 to 10% of your work, force working remotely to 80 or 90%. And just the bandwidth and access to internal systems, that entire architecture was really tested and pushed, and in many cases required very fast scaling to support the changes. And so I've seen some organizations like our own that did a remarkable job of staying on top of that, but I've also seen other organizations are still struggling with that, while we speak.
I think the internet providers too have really had to up their game during this whole thing, because everybody's been suffering from a bandwidth standpoint, because nobody expected to have so many people utilize the internet during prime time with such large files and things that they would normally grab from a local server, now grabbing over the internet, and everybody's paying the price from a performance standpoint. So even if you have an incredible connection on your server to the internet, even if you have a gigabit pipe connecting you to the internet, you're competing for network resources. So those are all challenges. That's why I mentioned earlier on utilizing OPI, which is something people stopped using years ago. But they said, can we dust that off? Can we give us a refresher on this? Can we get this started again? Because we're not going to be able to get our work done unless we start taking those 2-3 gigabyte images we threw on the server and making 300 kilobyte, for position onlys, and going back to that metaphor and having the server swap them out when the jobs are ready. So that was definitely directly related to the network performance issues for sure.
Yeah, and I think, of course, the most universal thing is communication styles. That there is no true substitute for ad hoc one-on-one conversations, and introducing that digital layer. It's the difference between walking over to the fence and speaking to your neighbor versus having to pick up the phone and call someone, or actually send a text, where you have to initiate a conversation rather than it just popping up at the water cooler or something like that. So a lot of somewhat unofficial exchanges of information are limited now. But the idea is you also do get greater transparency and recording of what resources are being utilized. So it's been both a challenge as well as an acknowledgement of how a lot of information traveled around different organizations.
I'm going to encourage the audience to start getting their questions together. There's already a few coming in. This one's interesting. How has hiring DAM professionals changed now that we're working remotely? It's an interesting question, because when you're dealing with remote teams or a remote person, and that person gets sick or vacation or they leave, how have you overcome that? Backups, multiple people? What are some of the ways you've adapted? What's changed?
I think within our organization, just with so many different sites, that so much of the work and communication was, for all intents and purposes, remote already. And we've definitely in the past and continue to really look for the quality of the talent as compared to their location. Now, certainly, there's still going to be a preference for someone that has easy access to your corporate headquarters or one of your major facilities. But of course, we're seeing with the pandemic that so many people aren't even going into those locations, even if they live a mile or two away. So it's really reinforcing the idea that the quality of the person and their ability to work with your tools and workflows is probably more important than the ability to get into a physical location. And I know when full staffing in offices returns here, we're still looking at maintaining a large portion of the remote integration, meaning why come into the office 5 days a week if 2 or 3 will suffice and you put a lower overhead on your corporate infrastructure.
So I can't really speak to hiring DAM professionals, but I can say that one of the things that B&O does have a specialty in is in the area of recruitment marketing. So we do a lot of work with our clients to help them to do a better job of doing recruitment in general, but also to do that in this environment, right? So we have a whole platform around virtual recruitment, excuse me. But one of the things that you want to do when you're trying to hire people in a virtual environment is, as much as possible, recreate the kind of energy and relationship and rapport that you would have if they came in for an interview, so that you can really get to know the person better.
I was just hired remotely, and this is my first being a remote hire when working through a recruiter. And it was a really great experience for somebody who's been in the industry for a while and wasn't really looking for a job at the time, but because my profile met the needs of what the company was looking for, it was easier to be found. And it made the job search experience much easier for me. I worked with a wonderful team who was on top of the interviews. They set up the interviews for me. I was able to do all of my interviewing remotely, and it didn't matter, it didn't affect my hiring ability because I had the skills that were necessary. So I think having a remote system like this allows employers to search wider and get exactly what they need for their various projects. So it does give a little more leverage, I think, from a hiring perspective.
Regarding the question about metadata, one of the things that I was thinking of earlier when Kevin was talking about the triggers and actions, right? So one of the things that we are looking to do currently is in light of the fact that we're working remotely and that we know it could be something that we have to be able to turn on and off on demand, right? So one of the things we're trying to do is get to the point where we're relying on communicating with our clients less through email, right? That we're using the triggers and actions and sending automated responses out of the DAM system to the client. So this way, if I'm managing the client as a project manager number 1, and I am unavailable later in the month, and they need to then take that project and it goes over to project manager number 2, there's not missing information in my email outbox that other project manager doesn't have access to, because those communications are now being integrated through the DAM system with the triggers and actions, approvals, things like that.
Yeah. Yep. Henrik did chime in and asked if metadata management, in our opinion, has improved while working remotely.
Oh, yeah. I can answer it, or Peter, do you want to take that one?
Well, I mean, I'll definitely say that is always one of the biggest challenges in any DAM. There's some expression like whatever you put in, you get out. And really trying to find the resources to manage the information that is associated with your content is critical, and still continues to be one of the biggest things that you continually need to push your community to work on and improve. And that really becomes more obvious the tighter you integrate systems across your enterprise. That you may initially start out using it as an archive, and people pull content down to create different pieces, whether it's a desktop publishing piece or something similar, a newsletter. But as you then begin to integrate it into your website, you're going to build different gates. And those gates are going to all be automated and centric around the metadata that you add. And part of that can be approval processes, including signing off on digital proofing and pushing things to different teams to add their contributions, and that it is not considered qualified for its end target until all of those things have been met. And certainly since the amount of remote working has come into play, the ability to make sure that all of the metadata requirements for those gates is met has become much more obvious, because there isn't someone running around the office with a stack of papers asking someone to add information there or mark something up so that you can bypass one of those steps and get the information to someone else to make an override. And again, just with the recognition of how people are working differently nowadays, and a number of you have already echoed, they're like, oh, how can I leverage this to get access to my content? You know, the teams you didn't think would use a DAM are now much more proactive and have their own gates and own metadata requirements. So it only works if everyone, you know, does their part. And this is helping to make that much more transparent. And you're actually now getting support from like upper management, you know, to help leverage dedicating resources to making this happen, recognizing that without it, the great system doesn't deliver what it promised.
I would add to that. I would say is that sometimes it's very difficult to get people that are holding a hammer to view anything else they say is other than a nail. So they have a workflow that they have and that they're happy with because they were in the office and they had a direct connection and they worked a certain way. But now they have to work a way that actually works with the fact that they're remote. And you could tell them for years, this is a better way to do it this way, and they refuse to work that way. But now they're adopting it. And I think those habits are going to come back when they go back to the workplace. Or I think a lot of companies, quite honestly, are going to keep a lot of people working remotely. I think they've seen a lot of the benefits of it, and they see that a digital asset management system can bring a lot of those creative functions and features and solutions and make it possible, and allow people to work that way for the future. And I think everybody who has got a metadata-driven workflow, they've probably made changes to it because of the pandemic and not being able to go to the office to fix a certain part of delivering assets, whether it's having layouts swap out from low res to high res, converting the images to a specific resolution, copying it to a folder, creating a PDF file, and delivering it into a hot folder which feeds a printer or a poster printer or a number of different devices. So, all those happen via metadata, which is great because somebody's moving the assets around. Everything is logged. It's all in the database and the history. Everything can be managed. So I think, if anything, it's been a really good thing for digital asset management and those companies that have adopted those types of capabilities.
Excellent answers. Take one or two more questions. Somebody's asking, is there a difference in remote work expectations, needs, restrictions for nonprofit compared to corporate, compared to government? For example, security, access, funding, and the like.
Anybody?
Kevin's chopping.
Well, I work across multiple types of customers: nonprofit, government, security environments, financial, publishers. So I work across all of them, and I would say that there clearly is a different requirement and a different expectation work and the restrictions security and being able to hide assets and being able to set the viewership of the assets. You don't want to expose your entire asset management library and all the content that's in there, because some stuff might be, let's say, for instance, they may have if it's an automotive company, they may have the 2024 new BMWs or the new Mercedes online, and you wouldn't want to have those exposed in the wild. And so having a digital asset management system allows you to set the data and locations that people are allowed to see, and keep stuff secret from those that shouldn't see versus those that should. So I think that's a huge point to make, is that you can control what's being seen in a good digital asset management system and who has access to what. And you can also watermark them, and you can also digimark them, and you can do all sorts of stuff. You can burn metadata into them. So those assets themselves, they have and they retain where the files came from. I think that's also something that's pretty huge these days.
Yeah. And I think also, just on the technology side, you see a big difference between organizations that have greater resources available, and what you're having to do is a trade-off between physical resources and processes. So you're seeing a huge growth in the requirements to support the whole bring your own device functionality, meaning you can work from home, but your desktop is in the office and you can't come in and bring it home. So it's going to limit, in many cases, some of the capabilities to whatever personal devices you have, or, some companies do. I know my last company in New Jersey completely switched to laptops over the last 5 years. And the idea was they experienced a number of incidents where the physical location became unavailable for, maybe a shorter period of time compared to the pandemic. Could have just been the sprinkler system going off. But everyone, that had iMacs on their desk or big, powerful Dell, desktops underneath them, couldn't work. So they really shifted to having portable devices with the requirement that you bring it home every night. And that way, if there was a snowstorm or something like that, you weren't completely frozen out from your ability to contribute to what was going on at work. And I see a big difference, certainly in the security levels. Many companies I've worked with will not allow any bring your own device functionality. Even if you want to use an iPhone or an iPad, that's got to be managed by the corporate IT for security reasons, versus others may make some distinguishment that you will only be able to access internal systems through something like a Citrix session, so they can control that, but you can use your own device to actually control that remote desktop. Or if you do have a web portal, yes, you can use that from any public internet access point. But if you need to get into any of the back-end stuff, then you're going to need a VPN, connection, and they're only going to allow that on their own equipment. And that's where those resources are really going to show based on the requirements and how different companies work.
Yeah. I think there were lessons learned, like you mentioned, a bunch of mini situations, hurricanes, power outages, floods, all things that occurred and people couldn't get to the office and work. We had a lot of experience with customers back in 9/11 that were based in that area and couldn't get to the offices. And, luckily, most of the publishers and printers and things that we work with, we sat down with them and created a catastrophic plan. And through proper catastrophic planning analysis, we developed plans for them, for the businesses, to say, okay, specific number of users will have dedicated machines at home that are company owned, company managed, as if they were in the office, and continue that. And then we're able to have their work done for that small period of time, which was in most cases, a few days to a week. Now you're talking months. So, people have to look at those and revise those plans. And I think that's what people are going to wind up doing at the end of all this, and say, okay, well, we've got to get serious, and we've got to look at our remote procedures and policies and how we're going to support as an organization. Yes, we're letting people use their Macintosh or their laptop at home, but we're only allowing them to use the DAM system over a web-based interface, but not these services unless they're connected on a company computer. So, maybe, companies revise and look at how they did things and, pick up all the lessons learned.
One other factor to consider when you're talking about the nonprofit and the government, in addition to the resources, is that depending on the scale of the organization, there needs to be a continuity of leadership, in the sense that if a board turns over every 2 years or every 4 years, or if a government office has a whole new set of leadership and there's not a continuity of the management, then you don't really have a good way to set up the infrastructure required for any enterprise system, especially a DAM system, where you have a clear understanding of the user groups, the roles, the privileges, the the metadata and the processes and the security issues. So even a nonprofit group that has a really robust budget, if it doesn't have the continuity of leadership, it would be very hard to implement a DAM, let alone to keep one current and functioning from one administration to the next. So that would be the only other distinction I would think would be inherent more in a nonprofit or a government office as compared to a corporation.
Excellent. It's a fast hour. Always goes by quick.
Was there one more at the bottom?
Ooh.
Yeah, we got more
Good one.
coming in, but fortunately we got to cut loose.
Okay.
I'm going to share a remote DAM survey put together by one of our previous panelists in the chat. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, we'll find ways in which to share those results and to help support all of us in our remote DAM journeys. You can find other New Jersey DAM panel discussions on YouTube and keep up to date with everything happening for digital asset management enthusiasts via our New Jersey DAM LinkedIn group and other social connections. And while you're there, don't forget to watch part 1 of this DAM remote working series. It's been a lot of fun. I want to thank everyone for being here, especially our panelists. Thank you, panelists. You did an incredible job. Not surprising in your experience, professionalism, and who you are. And I want to thank you, the audience. We hope you found this series informative. And we, of course, look forward to seeing you again in the future. Until then, I want to thank you for being here. Stay safe, healthy, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Adios.